Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Blunt, and welcome to the College Common Ground podcast. This is my new series where I'm going to be bringing on a liberal and a conservative every single week to discuss a hot topic in our country. And I'm super excited to have two incredible guests for the first week, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hey, my name's Michaela. Wouldn't consider myself conservative or liberal. I would say I'm more centrist, but I'm a believer, and I feel like a lot of my beliefs and my religion ties in together.
Hi, I'm Jake. I identify more as liberal just because, from my personal experience, the liberal belief system has allowed for more accessibility in especially this country. And as somebody who comes from a very diverse background, it just felt right to identify that way.
Welcome to the podcast, Jake and Michaela. Do you believe that the founding fathers intended the United States to have a distinctly religious foundation or a secular one that protects freedom for all beliefs?
So I actually did a paper on this last year. And I should say I do identify as Christian. However, when I was growing up, I was raised under Jewish faith. So I have that additional background behind me. But in my research that I wrote for this paper, Thomas Jefferson, and frankly, none of the founding fathers were very religious people. So he basically said, hey, schools and government offices are, government buildings, and separation of the church and state will allow basically not one specific religion to be practiced or represented in said building, especially in schools, which is where I did my specific focus on. My main point was if you teach one or represent one, you got to represent all of them.
Yeah, I think where I stand on that is I do believe America now is very religious. I think they welcome a lot of different cultures, a lot of different religions. I don't think necessarily it was built on one certain belief, but I do think it was built on protection of all freedoms, all freedom of religion to be expressed.
I do agree. I feel like it's definitely welcomed more people than we tend to realize. Yeah. But I do believe that when people say religious, their mind immediately goes to Christianity. And in some cases, that can definitely be represented with how some people run certain government officials. I mean, before a court case, everybody always has to put their hand on the Bible and say the whole thing about telling the truth and nothing but the truth. Most people do not put their hand on the Quran or the Torah or any of that stuff.
True.
Yeah, I think Christianity has become the sole religion, quote unquote, sole religion of the United States, whether we like to realize it or not.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Also, I think even today, you see it a lot through our own president. And so I think it has evolved more into when you think of religious, you think of Christianity.
This is about prayer in schools. So should prayer in schools be allowed in United States public school buildings for K through 12 education?
So when we're talking about just regular K through 12 schools, I personally do not believe that a teacher should force a specific time for prayers, because as we mentioned, there's probably a bunch of different beliefs. You have Christians, you have Jews, Muslims, you have this wide, diverse background of people. And essentially enforcing one religious belief could harm their way of life and basically say that their way of life does not matter nearly as much as this other person's way of life. However, if somebody does say like, hey, can I step outside and pray real quick? No matter what their religion is, I do believe that should be allowed. As well as like, hey, if it's Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, or any of those other like religious holidays that aren't, Christmas, Easter, all that fun stuff, I do believe that kids who recognize those holidays should be permitted that time off.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with that. I think I went to a secular high school, didn't go to a private Christian school or anything like that. And so I definitely think that it shouldn't be prohibited in the classroom, but I don't think it should be like initiated by a teacher or whoever. So I think if it's a personal thing, absolutely, I think the freedom of religion should be protected in the schools. But when it's coming from like a person in authority at the school, I don't think it should be like necessarily encouraged.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like you said, like both of us said, if
Finding so much common ground already, guys.
100%. Yeah, if one kid decides, hey, do you guys want to pray with me? I think that should be allowed. But if that's the teacher saying that, no.
So for the Pledge of Allegiance, I have a follow-up question. For anyone who went through K through 12, that's kind of part of the morning routine typically. So for the moment of silence, what do you think is intended for that? Or what do you think that should be used for? Because I know that there's conversation on if that is a moment of prayer time, what that is intended for. So I just wanted to know you guys' thoughts on what you used it for personally or what you believe that should be kind of explained to as young kids when they ask.
So I do not personally have any recollection of using that moment of silence for anything, but there were a few instances, obviously. Just self-reflection. I think whether you've got something going on in your own life or somebody else that has something going on in their life, I think, wishing them well. It can be the same as praying, but at the same time, I think the term praying has had such a tone of religion, and you get what I'm trying to say. It's been used to the point where basically you say pray and that's the only thing that you think of. While we're also on the topic of Pledge of Allegiance, I do want to say that the line "under God" was the most recent addition to the Pledge of Allegiance, and that did not exist before like the 1940s. So that is also why many people or some people might see the pledge is somewhat controversial or skip over that line. It's because it does give such a religious undertone. And as I mentioned before, we hear the term religious, we immediately go to Christianity.
What I used the moment of silence for during high school was honestly self-reflection, prayer, anything that was just really on my mind that I needed to think of. But I don't think schools necessarily frame it as a time of prayer, just because prayer is not something that's like forced. Prayer is something you do when you're like in relationship with the Lord and when you want to talk with the Lord. So I think having that time being designated for students who might not even believe that is like not right in my opinion. But I think it can be used for a plethora of things, and I don't think it specifically means one thing, and nor do I think the school specifically had one thing in mind for it.
Yeah. Well, like I was saying earlier, the only thing that gives the Pledge of Allegiance a religious undertone is the line, under God. They never say, take a moment of silence for prayer. They just say, please take a moment of silence. So do with that what you will, essentially.
What role, if any, do you believe that religion should play in our society, in our laws, in our government, and in our everyday life?
Laws and jurisdiction do fall under the same principles of like a government building, because oftentimes that's where laws are decided. So do I believe that laws should exist that say, hey, you have to take X amount of time for prayer. That's probably an exaggeration, but you catch my drift. I do not believe so. In society, I think it's really as much as we personally would like to make it, because I personally do not believe in, essentially forcing one's religion onto somebody else, because what I do with my life is not going to be the same as Jim Bob over there and what he does with his life.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, going off of that, I would say, I think in a sense of like laws, I don't think there should be like laws intact of like, oh, you have to do this, or you have to believe one thing, or you have to do another, because the whole idea of religion is like it's a relationship with whatever you believe. And like for myself, it's a relationship with the Lord, and that's not something, like I said earlier, that can be forced. It's something that you feel and learn and grow to believe, and that you experience. And so I think to tell everyone what they have to experience, likely they're not going to experience that. They're going to be turned away. And so that's kind of where I stand with it in law. I think it should be up to the individual, and personally what they believe. But as a matter of fact of like the whole country, yeah, I think that should be kept outside of it. And I wish there was a way to like blend everything and be like, hey, let's like all conform to this one thing, and everything be great. But that's not how the world works at all. So yeah.
When there is a president of the United States for our country, do you believe that they should voice what their personal opinion is on religion, where they stand? Where does that cross with their personal religious freedom as a citizen and a human being versus a leader and kind of a influential person of power? What would you guys say would be the important balance for that?
Okay, so going off of what I said earlier, I think it is very important that our president or whoever is in office be able to express their religious identities and their beliefs. I think it's important that people who are looking to them know what they believe and know what they're about. I think there's a line in which where you're telling people this is the right thing, and this is the only way. That's where it gets a little tricky. But I do think, like, if we're thinking about President Trump, and he's a Christian, our belief as a Christian is to go out and spread the gospel. And that's like one of our beliefs and what we're called to do as a Christian. And so I think him being like, hey, this is what I'm about is a great thing. But yeah, there's a line.
I would have to agree with you saying that there is a line. I would also add, be careful with what you say, because there have been times where some things have been said that have been misinterpreted and basically, if you look deeper into it, go against what the word says.
Yeah.
But I do also believe that, hey, you should be able to say, this is what I believe. I would also take that one step further, say, like, back to what I was saying earlier. If you're going to recognize one set of beliefs, recognize all of them, even if those aren't necessarily ones that you believe. Yeah. And that can be done with a simple Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, stuff like that.
Yeah.
If the government restricts prayer or open religious acts in general in public locations, is that an act on our religious freedom, or would you say that's neutrality?
Do I think it's an act of, infringing on our religious, our freedom of religion? To an extent, I would say, if you want to carry around your Bible, if you want to pray in public, that's your decision. But like we've said earlier, if it gets taken too far, then yeah, that might be where the line is drawn. some might see it as a form of neutrality only because they're so used to a certain rhetoric being pushed down their throat that, like, hey, this rhetoric is not being pushed down our throat anymore. I feel comfortable expressing what I believe, but at the same time, you're not going to be able to express what you believe because Jim Bob over here is not able to express what he believes.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think in a sense of it not being taken too far, I think it should, like, we should be able to carry around a Bible or pray, or even if you see someone and you're like, hey, I feel like the Lord is calling me to pray for you, and you ask them and they're like, yeah, I think that's great. Now when they say no,
And then you keep asking.
that's where it gets, yeah, no, I wouldn't do that.
So for college applications or job applications or any sort of application that you might do you think that religious affiliation should be part of that application?
I personally don't believe that. However, if you choose to say so, go for it. I know for, the honors college, there was a bunch of different types of essays where you basically talk about, hey, what stuff do you do outside of your academics? And I personally put down stuff that I did with my church, and that was my personal decision. There was not a box that basically said, hey, are you Christian? Are you Jewish? Are you Muslim? Are you whatever? And I think for the better, that's what needs to continue to happen, because I think with stuff like that, it can definitely place a label on you, which, I mean, unless you want a label to be placed on you, that, again, is your decision. But I don't believe other people should be looking at you or judging your academic character or even your character outside of academics based on simply what you believe.
I think that I agree. I definitely think that it shouldn't be a requirement to be put on your application, whether that's for a job, unless the job has something to do with a church or anything like that, or a college application, etc. I think that if you want to express that yourself, go ahead, absolutely do that. Like, if it were me, I'd probably do it, but somebody else might not, and that's perfectly okay. In a sense of, like, if we were to require that, I think it becomes really easy to discriminate against people, because when you're hiring someone and you're like, oh, this person doesn't believe what I believe, it could be really easy to be like, well, let's not hire them. So I think it could become really easy to discriminate against people if you were to allow that. And I just think if you don't allow that, if you don't require it, then I think that's just all around probably better.
I mean, you pretty much nailed it.
Hey, thanks.
So do you guys think that we found common ground, yes or no, or maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. I honestly didn't know that Jake was a Christian. And I didn't want to assume either. But I think we found a lot more common ground than I was expecting, honestly. And I think it helps that I feel like we're both very open-minded, and willing to hear each other out, even if we didn't agree. So I think that's cool.
I think the biggest thing that surprised me was just how much we put emphasis on, hey, if this is how you want to live your life, go for it. Yeah, that's the biggest thing that I thought was common among our ground.
Yeah.
Do you have any last final thoughts about any of this, or like what you were shocked about?
Good
surprised?
discussion.
Great discussion, honestly.
Yeah. All right. Shake hands again. Yay!